First of all, thank you so much for being here. I think it's awesome we can share this hour together. Thank you, John, of course. We told you a bit about Renko. We are a community of really curious and driven generalists, so to speak. And Callie, who will be moderating today's event, will be the perfect example of it. But thank you so much for tonight. Would you mind if I introduce you real quick?
Sure, yeah.
Let me start with a fun fact. I recently discovered via a talk you recently gave that just like myself, you also adamantly avoid using instructions when you assemble furniture. Is this correct?
Yeah. That's no. I mean, it depends on the thing. I forget that talk actually. I think I was probably trying to make the point that you can't steal people's fun, and that there's some things that people like just being chaotic when they're putting it together. Something like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. No deeper meaning to it. But
no
joke aside, everyone, John, to about 45,000 Twitter followers, is known as the author of The Beautiful Mess. And in his Substack, he talks about a lot of fascinating things, but most typically about the hard aspects of product development, data analytics and teamwork, but also the exciting and gratifying parts of it. And to Amplitude, the company that both John and I hail from. John is a head of product research and education, working with teams from around the world on helping them build better products. And I think the rest will come out of the conversation. So I will let Callie take over. But again, thank you everyone for being here. And I'm really excited for tonight.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to be here too.
Thanks so much, Beata. And I've just got two quick notes. One, we are recording, so hopefully that's not a problem for you. If it is, message Jen and she'll tell you what your options are, which I think are probably pretty limited. But just a note on that. Also, thank you so much to Beata, who really made all of this happen and has put a lot of time into it. So thank you, B. And then last but not least, we'll be sending out a survey to folks who are in attendance. So we really value your feedback on these events. And John, I'm sure, wants to know how he can be an even more incredible speaker and articulate his ideas. So we super value that. Please do fill it out when you get it. Any other housekeeping pieces I'm missing, Jen? Great. All right. Well, I think that John is just such a fount of wisdom, and there's so many directions that this chat tonight could go. So we really want to be engaged with all of you and what seems most interesting to talk about. But a couple of themes that we had been brainstorming were, John has an incredible, not messy at all Substack. So that might be a place that we could get started. And then from there, we can talk a bit about how your writing has informed and shaped your career. And then from there, perhaps we can talk about actually the substance of that career in product development. So that's kind of the arc that we were thinking about tonight. But folks, please do chime in the chat if there's anything you want to go deep into. So maybe we just kick it off with, so your Substack is called Cuttlefish. I don't know why that is. I love Cuttlefish, and your last name is similar, but how did you get started and why that name?
These are the legacy aspects of your web identity, I guess. I mean, I think that kind of hailed back to when I started to use Twitter. I thought it'd be funny to put John Cuttlefish as the name. And then so I kept using that. And I've almost felt indebted to have to use that now. But I could just change it. Now you've got me thinking about it. I mean, it's a pretty legacy idea. But yeah, there was not much more to it. I was just thinking that that'd be kind of funny. And yeah, that's it, basically.
Well, it's your domain now.
You can't escape these things. That's the thing that you need to realize is you're sort of if you inadvertently build these sort of following of things that you get. It's sort of like baggage, and then so at some point I'll just sort of delete it all and then start over again as like as an X, so they burden you after a while to do this stuff. But
And why did you start writing? What was the impetus?
Rage. It was like so if you've ever worked in a company and you just want to have a conversation with someone and you're just like, I want to talk to you about this weird organizational thing, or I want to, you can't find co-conspirators at the particular company. So that was maybe about 6 years ago or 7 years ago. I started, like on LinkedIn, there's a couple of posts, but then I got going on Medium. And then, it just progressed. I think when I stopped doing on Medium, there may be 500 posts there on Medium. And I got kind of, I got sort of tired of Medium. I was tired of the paywall and things like that. So I ported them all over to cuddle.fish. There's actually a fish domain name you can get. So I got the cuddle.fish, which I thought would be, at the time, again, I thought it would be funny. And so I basically put the flat list of all those posts there. And then I kind of wanted to change a pace and do these things. But yeah, I've been, what started me doing that? Just expression and like working thoughts through and whatever, what was on my mind. I don't think there's much more to it. And then, early on too, I think it just became like a muscle, like something you just do for fun. You just start writing. And that's one thing I've noticed a lot about people who, are attempting to write more. I'll talk to someone, they're saying, I want to write more. I'm going to write this blog thing. And I'm just like, well, okay, cool. I'll check back with you in a couple of weeks. And then it's like, I'm still working on that one post to do these things. And, there's a certain muscle that you build that it becomes parts of your life. You just have to do it all the time. So I definitely got into that swing. The Substack thing is a little different, where I committed in the beginning of 2020 to write. Little did I know there would be a pandemic, and all this stuff happening. So I committed to write once a week on Thursday nights. And so I actually did it every Thursday night through the year, except 1 week I overslept with like the baby or whatever. Like I slept in instead of doing the thing. And I woke up on Thursday morning and like furiously tried to write a post in the first 20 minutes of the day or whatever. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. It's just like a habit, I guess, the writing. But it was always, people, I remember when I was looking for a job, actually, one time someone said, yeah, we checked out your writing and we think you'd be a little problematic. Like, it sounds like you think really deeply about this stuff. I was a little worried at that time, but I kind of pushed through that and probably got my recent job because I wrote a lot. So, it eventually came back to be a net benefit probably in the long run.
Yeah. And I'm curious on that too, like it sounds like it was really just in the intrinsic value of putting something out there was what kept you going. Like it's a commitment to write once a week. Like that's a serious commitment.
Yeah, I think it is. And I mean, frankly, the writing thing in full disclosure, like I was getting sick of tech jobs. I wasn't really staying anywhere for more than a year. I worked at a couple places and I was really kind of getting pretty sour on the whole thing. And the other thing about the writing, it is enabled so many things. Like I've written these posts that then like lots of people read, and then people from conferences invited me to come and speak. And like I got to travel to Thailand and the Ukraine and all over Europe and Rio. And I've basically been able to like have this sort of second lease on a career life. If you think, I mean, I'm 46, I'm going to be 46 soon. It's pretty, it's good that this happened at this time. Like the gray is like coming in at this particular point, but like, so these things do happen in weird and unexpected ways. So I started writing this and it's kind of like never really quite that happy about the job, but this recent job at Amplitude, they actually sought me out because of something I liked doing. I liked writing. I liked talking about what I was doing. I liked helping companies. And someone at that company started hounding me. And I said, well, oh, geez, I'm kind of sick of this. And she was like, well, no, we want you for that. Like what you're doing is what we want you for. So it was kind of like a cool story in that sense for doing it. So yeah, back to the whole thing, the intrinsic value, I'd be lying if I said you get like a couple emails a week saying people thanking you for helping them in their career or helping them through a tough time, or whatever. That actually is a fair amount of motivation. It's pretty fun. So I don't know if that helps. It's not just like, yeah, it was just even trying to sell the 2020 posts of Substack. I made this little mini book for $5. That was the first time I had sold anything. So it was not like, the goal was not to go and, sell you my course or anything like that. Like this will be I'm delaying that because like once you've gone that route, you're never going to come back to do the thing. So anyway, hopefully that helps.
And an astute question from Valentin. You were mentioning like that there was a little bit of danger in exposing yourself in this way, and indeed some of the feedback may have suggested that.
Oh yeah, it's a little, that's an interesting, and I can think of 2 or 3 people who I know who are prolific on Twitter, who I can imagine are having a difficult time because of that. So it's not something to be taken very lightly. And I also recognize like my extreme privilege is like a white guy and doing this, that like, yeah, okay, oh, if I didn't get that job, I'm going to be able to do this other job. And so that side is a little dark, like this, you have to be, but put it this way, I was like, there would be like 10 posts about, the problem is that these companies would have Slack channels, and the people working at the company would start flooding the Slack channel with all these posts, basically saying like, anything like this going on in our company right now? And then, so I think that's probably why those people were like, okay, this guy seems kind of interesting, but he seems to be like creating an insurrection in our company with these posts. So I'm not sure this is like safe territory to do that. So I don't know, you do have to be careful, but I wasn't that careful, and it worked out in the end. So you can, if you're even just a little bit more careful than me, you probably wouldn't have a problem doing it. And all my posts now are much softer, and like more. I've kind of softened about my criticism. So it over time.
I'm just catching up here.
How did you find your blogging voice?
Yep.
So this is kind of funny. Like when I look back on some of the cuttlefish posts, I don't even recognize that person. I'm like, that is terrible. Geez, like that is just, what were you talking about for 4 paragraphs, doing these things. So I think when we could talk about voice in terms of like the topic areas and things like that, and, it's going to like scare people, I guess, a little bit, but like I'll find it to show people. I've written about the same thing 5 times. That's another thing too. Like I'm literally working through my thoughts as I'm doing them. And so, part of this is about kind of letting your freak flag fly, right? Like if you're into the John Cutler type of posts, you're going to be really into the type of stuff doing. There's certainly people on Twitter who are very astute ex-Google product managers and everything, people hang on their every word, oh my God, this is brilliant. I'm just not like that, right? So I think that part of it is just like leaning into what your voice is, and like the, what's like the authentic perspective you had. And then I think there's the question of how the writing reflects the voice, how authentic is the writing. I think that just takes practice. I used to do things like there's a product called Flow State, which is basically like, Flow State is, it forces you to write. So if you stop writing, it makes all your writing disappear on iOS. And so you can basically so Flow State, it's called the most dangerous app. If you look at it, it's pretty funny that they call it. So it's on iOS, but there's similar types of products. And basically you start writing, and if you stop for 3 seconds, everything goes away. So I also just kind of built that muscle too. I would start so the theory behind Flow State is you have your censoring brain, and then you have what's in your heart. And if you're writing, first gets out what's in your heart. You can always fix it. Like you can always censor it and edit it and do these things, but you should be able to create a pretty instant connection between what's in your heart and your mind and your fingers. So you practice that with Flow State, and you start with 1 minute, And that was hard. And then 2 minutes was difficult, like 5 minutes. Oh my God, if I stopped for 5 minutes, but I kept practicing too, to get it to like 60 minutes. I mean, I could write like 10,000 words, in 60 minutes. So I would just be like, product, product, product. Even if I just wrote the word product, 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 or if my mom called, it would be like, mom, 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 like whatever I needed to do to just keep the time going. So I don't know if other people have used those techniques, but it's a pretty, yeah, an interesting. This is an admission too. It's pretty funny, but when I worked at the company at the time, when I had sort of 0 Twitter followers, the first 500 followers or 800 followers, my friend said, well, my friend can get you, she'll post things on Twitter. And I didn't really understand Twitter. And I was like, whoa, you mean that they can post things I'm writing like that? I don't want to use Twitter. I just want the person to post the links to what I did. And they're like, yeah, you can actually pay someone to do that. And so I remember it was probably like the first 500 followers, I didn't pay attention for a month. I was like, people are coming to Medium. That person must be doing their job. And I go back to Twitter and there's like 500 followers. But then I saw the crap that they were putting on there. And I thought, okay, never again. Like, this is so stupid. Like, why would I pay someone to do that? So there's a little story too, like I didn't just completely cold start Twitter. I actually thought that Twitter was a way I could put links to my blog posts too. I don't know why I remembered that, but it's just like, yeah, it's not, yeah, I feel bad about that, but it's kind of funny.
Let's see, stop me guys, or, get Beata's attention, but I'm curious, like, if you, for folk, we've got a lot of writers in this group. And
awesome. Wow. Yeah.
Which is why I wanted to start with that.
Yeah.
But for folks who like want to get their writing out there more, or this is something that they enjoy, like, what sort of generalizable advice do you have, extrapolating from your experience, on, why one should keep writing or not writing, or how to pick topics to write about?
Yeah, I might not be the most representative person. I mean, I found my jam, which is product and UX and organizational thing. And I mean, I was going to show this, but like in the chat, like well, let me screen share and I can show you something which is pretty funny. Like yeah. So if you look, these are all, I went through all 400 posts and basically like, so I went through all of the, I've written 2 unfinished books, by the way, too. That's another problem we should talk about. All the Cuttlefish posts, all 45,000 tweets, all Substack. And then I affinitized themes across all of those particular things. But you can see how often I'm writing the same stuff over and over again. It's like systems thinking, ecosystems, whole systems, service ecology, scaling, systems thinking, systems, seeing the system, local and global optimization, and these things, or change agency, co-designing agreements, change agents, change agency, change, show, don't tell, advocacy, change agency, invitation over imposition, career, so I'm not the best, like, this is my life of 5 years in terms, like, I really into this idea of limiting your amount of work in progress. So it's like limit WIP, no handoffs, WIP, flow, utilization, slack, busyness, promises in progress, all these things. So basically what I'm saying is I found, I mean, there's a level of kind of like weird, beautiful mind element to this too. Like, I found my jam, like I found the thing in product and UX I really like. So the reason why I'm saying that for writers is I can speak to being obsessed, absolutely obsessed with a certain class of problems and then writing it from every single angle. But I can't, it's a little, yeah, I think so. That would be generalizable advice number 1, like find something you're obsessed with, but that's easy for someone to say and not so much. The one thing I've realized too is that I mean, yeah, I could speak about companies and tech and content too, but the world just needs well-written stuff. I mean, my friend works for the Wall Street Journal and I got her a gig writing for Amplitude. And I sort of served as the domain expert, and like she ran with it. She's written really good things for the Wall Street Journal. One thing she wrote about, like the beef jerky industry or something. Like, she's really like eclectic writer. But I had to like coach her into this particular domain to do it. So the one thing I would say for like professional writers who are trying to grapple with tech companies and tech and how to get things in there is to like partner with someone who understands the domain, or propose to the company that you get to interview someone who knows the domain, because the details really, really matter. And so actually at Amplitude, we do that a lot, where, I might say to someone internally, like, you have a really good story to tell. Like, I don't want to write it. And I was like, well, let me just interview you for an hour, and then I'll write it for you. I'll ghostwrite it for you to do it. And they'll be like, oh, that's amazing to do that. So I don't know, that we could, maybe I'll pause and see what type of writing, but my particular brand of product and UX thing might not be very representative of the world of writing. Maybe.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know a lot about it. So.
Well, and folks chime in if you've got more there, but I mean, there's a ton to dive into in the content here as well, which I want to make sure we get to. So I think folks would be really interested to know just like what it is that you like, it sounds like you were kind of out on a limb for a while there, being yourself, and then Amplitude came along and they were like, this is great. And it sounds like that solved a problem for you, which is that you finally, like, the things that had been kind of dangerous actually became a boon for you. And,
that's a great
you were
way
able to provide value to the organized world. So I'm just curious to hear more about kind of what you are doing there and why it's working really well for you.
What I realized is I was very sensitive to organizational dysfunction. As you can see, right? Like I'm like a poet of organizational dysfunction. Like I'm obsessed with like why, just before we were on seconds before we were on this thing, I'm like, here, I'll show you exactly what I was doing 5 seconds before we were on the thing. Like for fun, I'm doing things like, the more work you have in progress, the more heroics that are needed, the more people burn out, the more employee attrition you have, the more heroics you have, the more heroics are rewarded, which shifts the norms in the organization, which means you have more work in progress, which means there's less flow, which gives you more time to change your mind, which increases urgency. So I'm really sensitive to these dynamics. And I think that what I found with the Amplitude thing was to find a role that wouldn't, like, I don't sit at home worrying about Amplitude. Like my job is to basically help other people. Like I can go in and like drop wisdom for companies in 1 hour, and I don't have to sit and work at that company. But I'm not a consultant having to go out and sell my wares and sell 55 courses. Like, and that's why I feel so incredibly lucky that there are these jobs that kind of like mix. And I think maybe the lesson there is, no matter what your weakness is in corporate environments, like there is the potential for some kind of like happy medium. Now, if I worked full-time on our own product team, I'd probably be sitting there like, oh my God, like why are we shipping things the way we, I would get all up in my head. But the fact that I have like an external focus was the happy balance that I needed. So I don't know if that helps, but if it's generalizable to people, it's like, if something's not working, just stop doing it. Like if you're only working, if you just ping pong in and out of companies a year at a time, something's not working. So then you have to figure out like what can work, and like what is the thing that you like doing. I don't know if that helps. Do
you have any advice on that part?
Well, my approach lately is to sort of, if you are like me and you sort of try to work in companies or you feel these things, is this idea of kind of being a patient change agent, which is my one regret is that I was having a lot more impact in those companies than I realized. And I was so beating myself up about like, and is anyone listening? Is anyone listening? I got to let people know what's going on. But they were actually listening. So, like people come back 3 years later and be like, that thing you kept trying, well, that laid the seed 3 years later. Now we actually have that in motion. Or remember when you were talking to us about that, no one was really processing it. Well, now 4 years later, we've hired a new leader and they've gotten that thing going. So I think that the only, if you find yourself kind of maybe as like a high, sort of extra sensitive, and I don't even mean that in a bad way, and I'd put that myself in that category, you have to figure out how to play the long game in these companies without beating yourself up and putting your own self-worth on the line to do that. And so, that means like taking care of yourself, and it means sort of running little experiments in your company. And, if it doesn't go your way, that's maybe just the wrong time at that moment. And just, be kind of honor the impact you're having. But that advice, this might mean nothing to half the people on the call, and it might mean something to the other half. So I think it's like, you might not be like that. You might also naturally be wired in another way, but that's at least how I was wired in these companies.
I'm curious, just to tie that back to something you were saying earlier too, when you were saying with some of your earlier writing, it was just ending up in these Slack channels of people like using you as a way to be their own impatient change agent. And
funny, yeah. Maybe they were being more patient though. I mean, at least they were kind of like, maybe their patient change agency was to like drop the post in the Slack channel. Maybe. Yeah, go. I'm sorry, I interrupted with the question. Like,
well, I was just wondering because then the next thing you said was that you say the same things over and over again, but maybe it's softened a bit over time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If that's also just been.
Well, I mean, I think I've just become a lot more. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing: is change is not continuous. I mean, this is in organizations is you could be doing the right thing day in, day out for 3 years. And we've actually found this in the pandemic. It's like a big deal. Is like, we see this in Amplitude a lot, is companies that maybe had some kind of effort in play for years. And I remember I was on with like a government agency in Northern Europe, and he said something like, for 3 years, we've been trying this transformation in our company, and I never think it was going anywhere. And then the pandemic happened, and there's just enough of a catalyst to get people to try something new, and all of my work paid off. All that work that I put in. Now, I don't think people should beat themselves up. This is not about like, this is where the sustainability comes in, because obviously if he had spent 3 years kind of butting his head against the system, he would have gotten burnt out. But like that idea of like there being discontinuous change, that you're sort of laying the seeds. And so that's kind of how I've softened in this regard. I'm much more likely to just be like, yeah, it was funny. I was actually giving our VP of communications this like bit of advice. We're talking about our all hands. Now, no one likes all hands. Like, you can always say all hands sucks in some way. Why don't you change it? Oh my God, it's getting boring. Or why don't we have 2 global ones? Like, and I think I even said to her, I was so proud of myself. I said, you know what? There'll always be problems with all hands, but never change it by more than 2%, because the regularity of how it is actually super grounding for the company. So people will always tell you what the bad things are, but they won't tell you, like, they don't realize the regularity and how you should only tweak a little bit of it. So that's like kind of how I've softened. Like, before, I would be that person who's like, oh my God, the all hands was terrible. We didn't represent these new voices in the company. Like, nobody's gonna do that. And now I'm much more likely to be like, well, at the end of the day, don't give up changing it, but don't change it for change's sake, and realize that the regularity is also kind of very comforting for people. So that's an example from, an hour and a half ago. So that was a good shift for me personally.
We were also talking about something in our road mapping call around just how as somebody who's hiring, the way that people can shape the perception of them when they're maybe not as happy with the impact that they had.
Yeah, that's an interesting, this is fresh for me because we did a hiring effort on my team with maybe 500 resumes. So I read all of them. And I think what spurned that discussion between us is that, like, I've been in this position myself where your past company was dysfunctional, and like, you weren't able to do the things that you wanted to do at that particular company. And I was noting how, after reading 500 resumes, it was very obvious for me, even on calls, especially when someone was worried about their previous job and their ability, the fact that it was dysfunctional, and that they were like either overcompensating. You could just tell that they weren't leaning into kind of what did happen there. Or they were sort of just beaten up by it to do that. And so, yeah, I don't know if anyone's in the job hunting thing, but that was pretty eye-opening. Like, and I think this kind of goes to what we're talking about, where, even, and I have this funny story. I was not really planning to go and work at Facebook. That is not really a good match for me. But I remember, like, going to Facebook right after I had left a certain company, being like, I'm writing all these blog posts, like I know everything. So I'm sitting there at Facebook, and I'm just like, I bombed the interview. and I realized it's like I was all stuck because my previous job just was a little dysfunctional and it was hard to make it work. So yeah, that's pretty fresh in my mind right now. But I think that the tip there, going back to this change agency, is like, you realize that if they just slow down and kind of like kept their change agent efforts sustainable in their prior company and kind of made a little diary, like kept track of what was actually happening in the here and now, they probably did way more than they remember. And the dysfunction of the job is probably clouding all their memories of all the positive things they did do. So I think that's why I remember that, because I think that like figuring out how to kind of work through the trauma, like professional trauma of our work, and kind of come to a place where you're able to speak about it, without like overcompensating, but at the same time honoring what you did, is sort of a big deal. It's really, really important. I don't know if anyone on the call has experienced that, but like, it's certainly like,
What are you saying? Yes.
yeah, it's a big, it can take months to work through something. It can take months to work through a job that didn't plan out the way you wanted it to. And then you're dumped into this new interview and someone's like, walk me through something you learned in the last thing. And part of you wants to say like, I didn't get anything done in a year because it was just dysfunctional, And so that's kind of an art to that thing of like, how do you not say that? Because that doesn't work too well. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that. If you want to ask somebody who's been interviewing a lot lately, that's what I've been doing on the flip side as an interviewer. But
John, since you're asking, Valentin asked a question on that topic. Are there particular types of dysfunction that you think could be overcome more easily versus ones you should just pack up and move on?
I would say that, a friend of mine was like, I was crying every day at work. I was wondering if that was a good signal. And like, that is a good signal. Like, no one should be crying, and certainly anything where your safety is at stake or it's just not worth it to stick around. I mean, I say that, but again, I'm so privileged to be able to say that because some people are stuck in their job. I mean, my mom worked at an embassy, a Greek embassy. She's Greek, for 30, 40 years. And there was like 5 years would go by when there was a real like macho ambassador or whatever who would like, be really like a bad person in a particular thing. Oh yeah, you're recording this shit. But I mean, so she didn't have the luxury to do that. She was stuck in the United States and she's got a kid and she's doing that. She's not going to leave and do those things. So anyway, so everything I'm going to say caveats with that. But I think, if it's feeling like that, it's time to get out. But the one thing I would say about companies is a lot of the stuff just works itself out. And so if you can just even observe the slightest, even at Amplitude, we're going through a period of pretty rapid growth. B and I were talking about, we're going to like double our team, to do these things. This year will not be easy, but I have a faith. I see enough signals about the real genuine humanity of the people around me to know that there's progress and things are really good. Like, really good things happen at the company and we do really good things for our customers. So what I would say to Valentin is, anything unsafe, just head for the hills right away. But I would say that the types of dysfunction that are more sort of systemic, like caused by the sea changes of growth, or, let's say there's an acquisition. An acquisition can take a year to work out or more. Say a new leader like joins a particular department. It could take them a year just to get settled and figure out like the right grouping of people they want. So I don't know if that helps, Valentin, but it's like, I would say that, if you see jerks leave, if the system has not expelled the jerks, that's usually a good signal. But if everyone seems to be really nice and seems to be banging their head against the wall, against some sort of like inertial force in the thing that they can't quite figure out, those things often work themselves out. So I don't know if that helps.
Right. It's not always up to you to be the one to fix everything.
No, in fact, depending on, without getting too personal, depending on your upbringing and family life when you're young, some people need to be the fixer. And they actually self-identify with fixing their company. And at the end of the day, you actually have to realize that the company's changing. It just might not be the change you want. You do not need to be the fixer especially if you were a fixer when you were in your teens or before, or in your family, and you needed to fix the situation at home, you take that to your company, like, I need to be the fixer of this company. And the interesting thing about that is you're not differentiating like your needs versus the system familial needs of the company. You're kind of like, I need to fix it. It's broken. I mean, B knows, she can tell that I'm wired like this because I'm like, well, B, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I need to fix this. Like, we need to fix this particular issue. So it's obviously still inside me, but I think that's a big thing, that like, you have to take care of yourself. You can't take the weight of the organization on your shoulders in an effort to fix it. And frankly, that's also about power. You need to let go to let other people fix it. In fact, the most rewarding thing is to not be the fixer, is to just kind of coax the system in a way that the system meets the needs of the people there versus meets your needs necessarily. And so that's like a big step when you're working in companies. And it takes a lot of like, there's a book called Getting to Yes with Yourself, which is an incredible book by William Ury. And so Getting to Yes is the classic negotiation book, but he has a book called Getting to Yes with Yourself and Other Formidable Opponents. And he makes the point, he realized after writing Getting to Yes with Yourself, that the first person you need to negotiate is with yourself. So start there. So it's an interesting angle. So I don't know, we got way off track, but
no, not at all. We're big fans of negotiation books here. Lydia had a great question popping back up slightly of, could you just offer an example of navigating or presenting one's professional trauma in a constructive way in the interview process?
Yeah. And I think maybe this actually even gets back to getting yes with yourself and the idea of, so maybe we can split that in two ways. Like, let's say you have just a really traumatic experience at a particular company. And you feel compelled to have to fill in that blank for an interviewer. I mean, I would argue that, yeah, this is really hard to say, and now I'm thinking about it too. It's like, you're not going to work through professional trauma in an interview. So you have to come, it doesn't mean I'm not saying you got to solve that problem before you walk into that interview, but you have to start wrestling with it yourself to do those particular things. And so I think that, like, even in this interview process, like, the person we ended up hiring two people, and both had particular situations that were kind of traumatic. And they would say things like, well, I want to get this out there. I spent a considerable amount of my energy trying to shift this thing that I was really passionate about because I really wanted to get this out of this particular thing. And I probably could have done things a little differently, but it didn't work out exactly the way that I expected it. And now I want to but to your question, you asked about this, I'm going to do that. So this is getting heavy about interviews and stuff, but I think it's maybe that's what we're talking about in general, is like how to bring your whole self to getting a job. And this is very sensitive. Yeah, I don't know. Someone said +1. Are there any areas, not necessarily just in PM or even tech, that you wish people created more thoughtful content about? Oh, content, written, recorded. It's tough these days, right? It's like, YouTube, like someone's probably like live streaming the plumbing that I was trying to do before. I was literally just watching YouTube to try to fix my shower. And that's why my hands smelled, I think, like before I got on the call, and I had to go and clean it. But created more thought. So let me do the thing in tech as well. Or even in tech, just a little bit in the tech thing, is that the number one thing missing for tech companies is real stories. It's easy to write things about market or whatever like that, but like good, honest to goodness, like, oh, my friend works at this company, I'm really interested in what they're doing, and I want to pitch their story to this other company or this interview. Like, if you can go in and do a really good interview with a practitioner in a field and capture an essence of what they do in a way that's both universal and also applicable to the people in that domain, it's an incredibly important thing. And everyone thinks they can interview. I'm not very good at interviewing. Everyone thinks they can interview, but the people who do it really, really well are able to tell these like thoughtful stories. And so that's not like, that's in tech, like by far, that's the missing story, is how to bring more human, like real stories into the tech content. I think that was thing is, and then plumbing, fix the plumbing, the YouTube. Yeah, it almost worked. Are there, and then I think, yeah, created more thoughtful content about, yeah, maybe we'll move on. I think that's the tech, that's the one I was thinking a lot about this week, is just like these, and interestingly, I don't know if anyone writes for money or whatever, but here's another tip that I learned about writing for money, for tech companies, is that price really high. A company like Amplitude pays about between $100 and $200 per qualified lead that comes into our company. So if you have a blog post that suddenly attracts 50,000 people for the company because it's really well written, and a certain percentage of those see some call to action, a certain percent of them take the next thing, you could literally, the content you write could literally make the company, that they would purchase those leads for tens of thousands of dollars, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, right? So this is the dirty secret that we'll talk about with this, but it's like, so what you see with these writers is like, oh, I'm interested in writing these tech blog posts and I'm going to work for like $50 an hour. And as someone who pays writers, I want to find a writer that can work well with and can figure out a repeatable pattern for us to do that's mutually beneficial, that they like doing. So like my friend Becky, for example, the Wall Street Journal writer, she did a whole series of case studies for Amplitude because she's really good at writing them. And we really needed that human touch. And I forget exactly what she was charging, but it's in the, like I said, yeah, hopefully no one from Amplitude. I said, don't charge that. Like you gotta, like you are worth a lot more than that. Like you got to be charging in the thousands for doing this thing. Like you're like, these are really important. You've got to do that. And what I told her is, it's all like, imagine if I pay writers and I pay someone $150 and I have to like, it doesn't work out. And it's not the writer's fault, but I didn't communicate with them or whatever. That's not worth anyone's money. But if I can pay someone $1,000 and consistently get a really, really good working experience out of them, it's way, it's worth that money. Like I mean, I'm relating this to learning design because it's what my team does. But I said to a contractor that we had, like, she's like, I'm having trouble charging. And I said, look, my concern is the outcome. I would like to pay on an outcome. And she got done and she was like, I think I might have run out of the time that we allotted. And I was like, remember, I want to pay on the outcome. Like me paying you $10,000 for something that is a 2, not your fault, but just because we learned stuff, is totally where I'd rather pay you $20,000 for a 10. Like it doesn't. So there's this sort of pricing on finding the right groove with the client where they're happy how you work, you're happy how you work, and it's a consistent product for them. And they don't need to spend hours going back and forth with you trying to work out the details. I did ghostwrite for tech companies right after I left a job. And I learned this, I got really good at this. I did really well. Like I learned the formula. And I found my editor friend who's a teacher in Minnesota. And I said, I want you to make $250 an hour. She's like, how do you make $250 an hour editing? I'm like, our goal is to make $250 an hour. This is what we're going to do. I will spend 3 hours writing. You will spend 1 hour editing. We'll always charge $1,000. And that's what we're going to do. And it's going to be consistent. It's going to be really good. And I know the topic and you're really good at editing. And so this is what it's going to be. And of course, someone balked at that price the first time. But when we delivered on that and got the cycle going, they're like, this is a really $1,000 really well spent to do that. So yeah, I should do a whole talk for you on what I think. I have this whole vision for how writers could break into like keeping up whatever hobbies they want in life by writing these sort of random articles for tech companies. But that's a whole
other. I would love for you to do that talk. I think I can commit us to that, Jen.
Yeah, it's a pretty, yeah, it's this whole world. But again, the key thing I think if you're a writer is writing for-profit corporate companies and tech companies is it's as much about the working style as it is about, because I've hired great writers who kept bombing the same article because we didn't figure out a way to get them the domain expertise. So every article was going to kind of be crappy. So I don't know if that helps anyone on the call.
Speaking of domain expertise, I want to shift. We've only got about 10 minutes left. I want to
Oh,
make sure we
geez.
get to talk about product.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. To kick us off, Jen had a question. What product/data insights are signature theses for you?
Oh, signature. Oh, signature thesis? Oh, like with the writing, like what do I write about a lot? Or let me see. I'm trying to find the question from Jen. So I'm missing one word that you said.
Jen, do you want to jump in and just clarify?
Oh yeah, I was just wondering what themes, like you show
Oh.
documents that you keep revisiting. Are there any particular insights that you feel like this is my brand, this is what I stand for? When I die, this is what people are gonna know me for.
Oh yeah, I mean a couple of those. Yeah, and around measurement. I mean, let me think, because I've probably written them in the last couple of weeks again. One would be like measuring to learn versus measuring to control. So this happens a lot in companies where there's KPIs and goal setting, but it's not actually measuring to learn or improve the product. It's actually measuring to do performance management or hold people accountable or do something like that. So that's one common theme I've found written about a lot, which is like, how can you create an environment where if there is disconfirming information that you measured from, like that would actually make you stronger versus making you, once you attach something to performance management or anything like that, like, wow, what's amazing. The number's always there. It's like I think that's Goodhart's law or something like that relates to that. So yeah, that measurement to control versus to learn is a big thing.
I want to interrupt you. I want to get the other ones too, but on that note, I'm just curious sort of on the organizational design side, if there's anything that you've seen work really well to create the safety for teams to say like, this just didn't work.
Yeah, actually the key that I use in a lot of our workshops is I explicitly tell them that when they create these sort of metrics frameworks, that they're just, I make it super, super obvious that uncertainty is okay. Mm-hmm. So like I do really like fun, I don't know if you're into product or any of these particular things, but like if I said, to Jen, like, Jen, what are the factors of like sustainable health? She's like, well, sleep and this and that, she'd list these particular things. And so I wouldn't go in there and say like, okay, well, we're going to set a sleep goal for you for 6 hours a day or anything like that. I'd be like, okay, well, let's map this out. We do these workshops and like, well, what's the minimally viable way to measure sleep at the moment? It's like hours sleep. Okay, that's good. So I try to make it really, when talking, if you go and say to a team like, oh, here's another one, don't use the word like success criteria. Like if you use the word success criteria, you've already biased yourself. So what the team is going to go like, we did not succeed. Success criteria has not been meted. No, magically they're going to meet the success criteria because have you done it? So you might use words like, what is our definition of progress? Or like what is our greatest area of uncertainty and how can we reduce that uncertainty by just enough so that we can make our next decision or something like that. So I don't know if that helps. This is sort of more, workshop-y type stuff, but it helps.
That's awesome. I didn't mean to like.
No, this is
off track, but
yeah, that was some of the insights one. I think one thing I dig into a lot are these intuition traps. I'm obsessed with. Again, this is sort of every time I show this stuff, there's a little bit like I admit how I'm a little crazy with this stuff. But I make these tables. Another theme is making tables, and I'm just obsessed with making tables. Like this is a thread of tables. Here's one set of tables, and now look at the themes. It's like our intuition says instead try. Our intuition says keep people busier. Actually, we need to do less. Or our intuition says plan ahead. Actually, you should limit the amount of planning that you're doing ahead, right? Individual goals, team goals. But so I'm obsessed with tables, like this table after table after table. And one thing, I don't know if anyone uses one thing with Twitter, it's hard to keep track, but I actually had to eventually create an Airtable of all my tweets to remember them. Like these are a table of, I mean, this is like I just draw and draw and draw and draw and draw, and there's all kinds of things. And you can see it got better over time. Like I got better at drawing the things. But yeah, I think that this, these sort of what I think one theme is these intuition traps, right? Where like we think, a great one on Teams is this idea of like, especially in the Bay Area, it's very much like give an engineer a project and get out of the way. And in actuality, there's all kinds of perverse incentives with that. Like you end up having 40 designers and engineers and having 40 projects in progress at once. Like that's insane. That's way, way, way too much. And then you don't leverage diversity, right? It's like, you don't leverage diverse perspectives, but everyone thinks it's more efficient that way. Like, well, why would that person want to collaborate? We're going to get a lot more done if that one person gets it done. So I think that's another theme in all these tables, are these kind of intuition traps over and over and over again. I love exploring those particular things. I think those are probably two themes that crop up again and again.
And I'm curious, since you mentioned intuition and Amplitude is an analytics company, just as a product thinker, how do you weight when to use intuition versus when to use more data-driven, more like, go ahead.
I mean, we see a lot we have like Bay Area customers that are just driving in data circles, to be honest. I mean, if the company's honest with ourselves, some of the companies are very data driven, but they're just driving around in circles. Like they're not really sensing new opportunities, like new step change opportunities to do that. So yeah, I don't have one thing I would say is just, I don't know if anyone who's involved in tech or working at these particular companies is, first of all, just try to pay attention to what your company's philosophy is on that and realize that other philosophies exist. You'll be in some companies is like, if you don't bring data, we're going to do it my way. Like that is so dysfunctional. Or you'll see people like put quotes like, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Actually, the person who wrote that, literally the second sentence later says, but not everything that can be, you don't need to measure everything that needs to be managed. Like, so one thing I would just add about that is like, realize that companies sort of evolve their own sort of philosophy, but don't assume that's the only way that companies work. Some are much more sort of intuition driven and then like verify it later. Some don't really worry about measurement at all. I don't know if that helps or is interesting to people, but different companies have different measurement cultures, which you realize.
I love this.
Yeah. That's one of the classic ones. Yeah, that's really
Well, in our last 3 minutes, we've got 2 closing questions for you. The first is just, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, geez. A little bit about this like sustainability, patient change agent stuff, to be honest. Like, I think that, my younger, like 20s, I was distracted playing music for a decade, basically. And then I got super, super into bikes, like this weird cycling mid-30-year-old, which is super weird on many, many different levels. And then I got into tech stuff. So I've been like all over the place when it comes to these things. And like, I would say, this is going to sound really like parental at the moment, but I did not slow down to take care of my money. This is as silly as it sounds. Like I have one card and all my money in a checking account. Like I don't have enough room in my head for Bitcoin. Like it's crazy. Like I don't want to do any of that stuff. Like, and I've always thought that the best investment is in myself. Like, why would I put money into a stock? Like just invest in myself, like buy something cool or like try a new experiment. So, but I've been really bad with money. So, but once there is that book called Your Money or Your Life. And that had so many really good lessons in it. And I remember reading it and just being like, wow, there's a lot to be said here about sustainability if you can just take the right steps in terms of your finances. So I know this is a boring answer, like, but just think,
very practical.
Take care of your practical, like monetary self, I think would be one.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think the second thing would be, around that, like, that would be around that these I guess it would be that, like, this whole idea where I'm at now with Amplitude and doing these things is like, set yourself up for like the long play sometimes. Like if you just, I mean, I remember I did that with music too. Like, I made sure I just had some money coming in the summers. We would go touring or we would do whatever. Like, I set myself up to be able to play music as long as it was satisfying for me, like, to do that. And so I think that would be the other thing when you're setting yourself up for these hobbies and things like that, is to just, it does take a while. Like, it's just not going to happen really, really quickly to do that.
Speaking of things taking a while, the second question is, what is one thing that has contributed to your success, but that you've only been able to recognize in retrospect?
There's a blessing and a curse to this, but is just true, the obsessive. I think my actual issues, I think I probably have pretty severe ADHD now that I haven't, like, I'm just getting up the courage to get diagnosed with it. And so, but I think that the particular brand that I have means I'm just an all or nothing person. And so the way that I can get anything to happen is either through these massive quests, like write a post a week, or, do all this stuff, or, draw 1,000 things on Twitter or anything like that. And so I think I've realized that both has led to a certain level of success once I sort of fine-tuned it, but it's also not very good for just well-being, right? Like, if you have to be that extreme to get in the groove, it can be pretty damaging. So I'd leave people with that. Like, it's pretty heavy, but I think that there's an angle to that we all have these things that are we have to kind of, now I don't know if I'm going to like take medication or anything, but it's like, how do I work with that? Right? Like, how do I work with that and stay healthy, while I'm doing it? So yeah, it's pretty heavy, but that's what I would say to folks.
Well, thank you for sharing both your time and your knowledge with us.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun. It's fun to see. Yeah, Jen. Last time I saw Jen, I was like working behind the counter at the bike shop, obsessively riding bikes like that. That was what I was really into doing. Nothing, seriously, you can do something on a bike for 5 hours and time goes by like it never existed. And then if you try to do certain other things for 5 minutes, it's like, oh my God, like, I'm getting distracted. Like, on the bike, I would sit there and just be like, I'm in the zone. So anyway, it's all, yeah, it's fun that I saw Jen again. So anyway, awesome.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, for the, this is great chatting with folks.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Quick reminder to please fill out the survey when you get it. It's really ususeful. And thanks again to Beata for.
If anyone wants to follow up on writing for tech companies, that I think I've figured out this little jam that could help you, just you could reach out through B, and yeah, we can talk. I can try to give you some tips about how I figured that out.
I love that. Thank you so much, John. This was wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, B.
Well, it's gotten dark behind me. There was like the sun shining through it. Okay. All right, cool. All right. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Great,
you.
bye.
Bye.